Well, hello and welcome to Round the Table, live with Christian Concern. I'm Tim Dieppe, and today we are talking about abortion as our topic, and we're particularly focusing on an abortionist doctor who has been trying to stop lives of babies being saved through trying to reverse the treatment of the abortion pill. We'll get into the details of that, and we'll also discuss what's been happening in the House of Lords this week as they've discussed abortion buffer zones. But I'm delighted today to be welcomed by, or to be able to welcome, Dr Dermot Kearney, who is a life-saving doctor who has saved lives of many babies, which we'll get into in a minute. Welcome, Dermot. Really nice to have you with us. And also by Tim Lewis, who is a theologian who now works for Brephos, pro-life organization, and speaks out on this issue. Dermot, just tell us a bit more about your own experience in this. We started seeing people posting out these abortion pills during the lockdown, and quite a lot of women took the first pill and immediately regretted it and reached out for help and found you. And what happened next?
Yeah, so if a mother who's pregnant has taken the first abortion pill, like she's decided at some stage that she's either by voluntarily or by some form of coercion from others, that she's going to go ahead with a medical abortion or drug-induced abortion. It's a two-stage process. They take the first drug called mifepristone, and then they're meant 1 or 2 days later to take the second drug, misoprostol, to complete the abortion. Yeah. But many girls, many young mothers, after they've taken the first pill, regret the decision, sometimes immediately, sometimes a number of hours later, and they decide not to go ahead with the abortion. They want to try and do something to save their babies. And we know that as long as they don't take the second pill, that immediately increases the chance of some survival, because if they take both pills, there's less than 2% chance that the baby will survive, depending on the stage of gestation, but generally between 1 and 2%. If they take both pills. If they only take the first pill but don't take the second pill, there's probably 15 to 20% chance, less than 20% chance that a baby might still survive, again, depending on the stage of gestation.
Without any further treatment.
So we just using a little bit of logic, found out many years ago, in the 10, 12, 14 years ago, initially in the USA, that if we give progesterone to women in this situation, so they've taken the first pill, which blocks the action of natural progesterone, which is essential to maintain pregnancy. So if you can give progesterone quickly, as long as you don't take the second pill, you increase the chance of the baby surviving more than 50%. The American experience was more than 65%, actually. But there's a greater awareness of it in the United States, and there's also less opposition to it. It's they get the progesterone much more quickly than we do in this country. But we found that there's a more than 50% chance the baby will survive if we can get progesterone to the mother before heavy bleeding and major cramps start. If she's already experienced heavy bleeding, which some do within the 24, 48 hours, then we're probably too late. But if we can get treatment in quickly, we can more than double the survival rate of the baby. So that's what we had been doing, from myself and Dr. Eileen Riley, from 2020 up until we were commanded to stop doing so, while an investigation into our practice took.
Let's come back to that. I just want Tim to have opportunity to introduce yourself. Tim, tell us about your work and Brephos, where you work now, and you're doing an interesting PhD project as well.
Sure, thank you, Tim. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. Thank you for having me. First of all, yes, I work for Brephos very much in a part-time capacity. I've known about their work and ministry for a number of years and been supportive of them, but since really autumn last year, I came onto the team as their church network and theology lead. So primarily that's involves speaking in churches, liaising with churches, and also theological colleges, training courses, those kind of institutions. Everything Brephos is about is really helping Christians on an individual level, and churches, Christian organizations, understand really the reality of abortion, which is it's a euphemism for killing children in the womb, and helping Christians advocate for the unborn child, equipping them with the skills they need at all sorts of different levels. So that's what I'm involved in with Brephos, and doing occasionally writing pieces from a sort of theological point of view, from seeing what the Bible has to say about this. And actually, the Bible has quite a lot to say about pregnancy, about the child in the womb, about the unborn child. And so, yeah, my PhD is just seeking to develop a biblical theology of the unborn child, all the way from kind of Genesis through to Revelation, bringing all the different disparate texts together and trying to make something coherent and cohesive out of that. So, yeah, I've been doing that now for about 3 years, part-time again, over in a place in Ireland. Very much enjoying it. So yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Great, very good. And if you're watching live, do put your questions and comments in the chat on YouTube or Facebook, and we can see them and we'll try and respond to them. Now, so Dermot, you were offering this life-saving treatment. Remind me, how many babies have been saved through this kind of treatment of offering progesterone to reverse the effects of the first abortion pill?
Well, throughout the UK, I'm aware of at least 44. And myself, I've been responsible for 22 that have been born alive and well, with another couple well on the way too. My colleague, Dr. Eileen Riley, had already saved 12 babies alive and well. We know of one other consultant obstetrician in the northern part of the country that had given progesterone in this situation when requested to do so by a woman who regretted the decision. And during our period of suspension, I'm aware of one other doctor that kept the flag flying, and he has been responsible for at least 9, possibly more. So I'm aware of 44 that have been saved, but there's another between 10, 15 sort of well on the way as well. So we should.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you got suspended at some point, and complaints were made against you last year to the General Medical Council, the GMC. Tell us about that. What happened? Who was bringing those complaints against you?
Complaints were brought by a number. In my own case, it was mainly through medical director of Mary Stopes International, MSI, Dr. Jonathan Lord. But also a separate complaint came from the Royal College of Obstetricians. Mainly interesting in their complaint, they said they weren't so much concerned about the treatment we were offering. It was more the people involved. They didn't like that there was Christian doctors providing this treatment, that we could not possibly give non-judgmental advice to women in these crisis situations. And then there was also a media campaign by like a pro-abortion media group called Open Democracy. So between the three of them, they were the ones who brought the complaint. And the complaints, in my case, there was 10 main complaints, and they varied from that we were using an unlicensed medication remotely, that I was acting outside of my area of expertise, that we weren't following the recommended guidelines on abortion practice, that we were taking women out of the normal NHS practice to provide this unethical treatment on them, that we were enforcing our Christian beliefs on these vulnerable women, and that we were bribing them to do what we wanted, to take them out of the care of the normal GP and hospital system, but none of which had any factual basis to them. And when the investigation was eventually complete, none of the allegations were upheld. So the case was dropped by the GMC, and they in the final statement they said that there was no prospect of obtaining any proof to back up any of the allegations that had been made. But it went on. So the initial suspension was put on.
A strong vindication for you then, Dermot, in the end. You had this investigation, lots of allegations being thrown about by various people, particularly Jonathan Lord from Mary Stopes, who we'll come back to. And you were fully vindicated in the investigation by the GMC that concluded that there's no evidence to substantiate any of the claims against you, and that the treatment that you've been administering, which is progesterone treatment to reverse the effects of the first pill, is a safe treatment and may be beneficial as well.
Yeah, the GMC can't make clinical judgments, but their expert witness that they hired or employed to give his opinion on the case, he came out with the statement that actually the strongest point that he made was that what we were doing was in addressing an unmet need. That was the very phrase he used, an unmet need. Right. And the way he was being critical of the people there before us that should have been providing this service to women who requested, but nobody was prepared to do so. So what we were doing was an unmet need. And he came out, he said, while there wasn't a lot of evidence in favour of it, certainly there was no evidence to suggest that it was dangerous in any way. Yeah. And he said that there was some evidence. It wasn't the strongest level of evidence that we like to have, things like randomized controlled trials, but he said there was a reasonable amount of evidence that was available on, to the public on PubMed, So he was happy that we weren't doing anything that was,
you can't
that was
exactly
wrong.
do a randomized controlled trial of trying to reverse an abortion, can you? I mean, that's not very ethical to do that.
It might have been 15 years ago when nobody knew, but now with the information that we've accumulated over the last 14, 15 years, it would be unethical to say to some women, sorry, we put you on a placebo instead of the drug, the active drug that might help to save your baby.
Yeah. So now, Dermot, now a complaint has been made against this very same director at MSI, Dr. Jonathan Lord, for misleading the public and misleading a government agency and indeed patients as well about abortion pill reversal treatment. Tell us about what's happened there.
I'm one of the signatories to the letter, but also a number of other doctors who voluntarily came forward because they were concerned about some of the possible behaviour of Dr. Lord on this issue, and some of the dishonesty or the misleading information that him and his organisation are still trying to convince the public, because they're still making efforts to make sure that nobody takes abortion pill reversal seriously, or to try and discredit it. So efforts are still being made, and the information that they're putting out there is not true. So we felt that we had to do something to counteract this. There's dishonesty in the medical profession is considered very seriously. Like I've looked at other cases that the GMC have been involved with, and dishonesty is the one that they consider to be one of the most serious. And when you're trying to influence, public policy, the behaviour of regulatory bodies, by giving wrong information and misleading information that to be wrong, and to be incorrect, that has to be taken seriously. So among the issues, for example, the one that caused me most concern was that he and his organisation, when in their application to NICE, because NICE brought out guidelines in November 21.
Just explain, because listeners won't know what NICE is, Dermot. Just explain who NICE is.
NICE is it's a well-respected body called the National Institute of Clinical Excellence and of Care and Clinical Excellence, which is very powerful. And if NICE approve of something, then it's very difficult for any health board or health authority to say, no, we can't do that, we won't do that, if NICE give their approval to it. So it carries a lot of weight on decisions made by NICE.
So they approve drugs and medicines and regulate to a degree how they're used and what they can be used for.
Treatment and management strategies. So they're a very influential body, and they investigated the issue of using progesterone for preventing miscarriage, because there had been some controversy. Some doctors were given progesterone to prevent miscarriage, and sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. And a number of studies had suggested that there was no point in doing that. But then another study suggested that, at least in some cases, it could be useful, and that it was certainly very safe to do so. So NICE, in November 21, issued national guidelines that progesterone could be considered and was recommended for women who'd had one previous miscarriage and were threatened with another if they were experiencing symptoms suggesting a possible second miscarriage in early pregnancy. So the abortion bodies were concerned that groups or people like myself and others who support abortion pill reversal might take this opportunity, and we would have done, to apply to NICE to say that, okay, well, we're given progesterone for these threatened miscarriages, even though it's a different circumstance, they're induced miscarriages induced by the drugs that are used. And it makes sense, because the reason that progesterone might be successful in some cases is to do with progesterone levels. So if the mother's body is not producing enough progesterone, or it's inadequate, sufficient amount of progesterone, then there is a risk of miscarriage. So what we were doing was counteracting the effect that mifepristone has on the actions of progesterone. So it made biological and scientific sense that we do this treatment. And so they were concerned that we would jump on the bandwagon of the NICE decision. So they put in applications, not only MSI, but also BPAS and the British Association of Abortion Care Providers, put in applications that to ensure that the final guidelines would state that this did not include women who had taken mifepristone, which is fine. They're entitled to that opinion, and we will dispute that opinion, but they're entitled to have that opinion. But the MSI application went too far. It went to say that they had received a number of reports from women who had suffered a poor experience at the hands of doctors who were providing this abortion reversal treatment, which is not true. We know that there was no reports from women. None of the complaints that were received to the GMC came from any of the patients we had treated. No complaints came from any of their families. So the only complaints came from the disgruntled abortion providers and those who were, extremely in favor of promoting abortion.
So it appears like they actually, it appears to me like they actually lied tonight about and actually made up things and said things that they knew were false.
They said they had received, or they were aware of several poor experiences that women had suffered, which we know is not true. We know that
no evidence of that. There's no record of phone conversations.
We knew when going back before that, when we were trying to appeal the decision against us, we knew that our appeal depended on the witness statements of the women involved, and we knew that all of them, even those who decided not to go ahead with the treatment, and there were some, about a third of the mothers who contacted us decided for whatever reason, usually due to pressure from others, but not to go ahead with treatment, and they went ahead with the abortion. But even we got some witness statements from a number of them, and even they were very supportive of what we had done, the care that we had offered, the kindness, the support. None of them had anything negative to say about us. They're all very positive. And then, of course, the mothers whose babies had been born, the mothers whose pregnancies were continuing, even some who tried the treatment but it didn't work, because, as I said, it only worked slightly more than 50% of the time. So we got statements from all of these groups, and all of them were very encouraging and very supportive, very positive.
And the one that's really struck me, Dermot, as well, was that Dr. Jonathan Lord has been making this claim, this statement in public, that a pregnancy has an 82% chance of continuing if the second pill is not taken. So after you take the one pill, he says 82% chance of survival. Now, you just explained earlier on that it's actually less than 20% chance of survival, isn't it? How did he get it so wrong?
He gets it so wrong because, first of all, no studies have looked at the survival rate after the first pill. The only studies that have actually addressed this question have only gone to 15 days, and we know that it's less than 25% up to 15 days. That's 15 days after they've taken the abortion pill. And we know that there's a later loss rate as well, because we've had many patients, many women who've contacted us who've gone with progesterone, and they've been doing great for 15 days, and then on the third or fourth or even fifth week, they've miscarried very tragically. And some of them may have been natural miscarriages that would have occurred anyway. So first of all, we're not comparing like with like. When we say there's a 50 to 55% survival rate, that's to birth. That's to birth, live, healthy, happy birth. When they say that when we say that there's the survival rate if the woman just takes mifepristone but doesn't take progesterone, that's only to 15 days. So there's a 20 to 25% chance that the embryo or fetus will survive to 15 days. We don't know what happens up to birth. What he's doing, he's taking a paper, and I have it here in front of me, from 1993. Oh, so sorry, 2013. So quite recent, from France, led by an obstetrician, Dr. Bernard, lady obstetrician. Now she was interested in finding out if babies survived exposure to the abortion drugs, and not only mifepristone, but mifepristone and misoprostol as well. She wanted to know, was there any increased risk to the babies? We know there's no increased risk to the mother necessarily from the treatment, although heavy bleeding and other complications do occur. But they wanted to know if the baby survived, was there a risk of some congenital problems? That was what the study was addressing. Now, in that, they asked for volunteers, for women who had changed their mind for whatever reason, or who had taken both abortion pills, but the abortion hadn't succeeded. And then they hadn't subsequently gone for termination. Because in most cases, if the two drugs don't work, then the mother ends up having a surgical abortion. It doesn't happen very often, but it's, as I said, it's 1 or 2% of cases, but the vast majority of them will subsequently have a surgical abortion. So this was a self-selected group. So these were women who managed, for whatever reason, to maintain the pregnancy despite having taken mifepristone and misoprostol. And they managed to get 105 in total over a 13-year period in France, over a number of different centres, women who voluntarily came forward. So the babies had already survived. So they were taking a self-selected group. They weren't looking at the total numbers of babies that had been lost. Because if you took that to its full conclusion, so he said of those then who survived and who entered into the study, 82% managed then to have live births, and then there wasn't any increased risk of congenital malformations with those babies. But if you looked at the full figures for it, if you looked at those where the mothers had taken both abortion pills, then it's even higher, something like 96%. So by the statement he gives that 82% will survive despite exposure to the mifepristone, if you went and read the next line, it said that 96% will survive if the mother has taken both pills. It just doesn't make sense. Either he doesn't know how to correctly interpret medical statistics, scientific statistics, or he is deliberately manipulating those figures to try to mislead the public and whoever else might read it. And this has been published on a number of Sorry.
It would be generous in saying he actually didn't understand it. It's an extremely poor understanding, isn't it?
I would have thought so. So that's not how medical statistics work.
Yeah.
82%. Most authorities will accept, and even in the editorial in that same, commenting on that, in that publication, it was the British Journal of Obstetrics Gynecology. Even the editorial commenting on that article makes the point that we know that the survival rate after mifepristone is about 20%. Then that's to birth. But that's the studies looking at that have only gone to 15 days, so we suspect it's much less than 20%. But we can't prove that for certain. But either way, it's said given progesterone more than doubles the survival rate. That's the important point that people try to dismiss.
Yeah, and he's trying to deny that. But then the other shocking thing, Dermot, is that he also harassed a patient as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's very well. I won't go into too much detail because I haven't. Mind you, that patient did come forward, and she was one of the people who gave very strong supportive statement on my behalf, and she did mention the harassment that she felt subjected to by at the hands of Dr. Lord. He tried to persuade her. She was a young woman who didn't. She didn't go ahead with the progesterone treatment. Let's say she went back to Mary Stopes to tell them that she had spoken to another doctor. She had changed her mind, and they somehow persuaded her that progesterone was not a good thing to do, so that she should go ahead with the abortion. And she did. She went ahead with the abortion. But then she developed complications, and she, as happens in at least 7% of cases, it was an incomplete abortion. So she ended up still bleeding, still in a lot of pain, and she developed signs of infection. So she went back to Mary Stopes to tell them that she was having pain and difficulties, and they said, "Oh no, it's nothing to do with us. You have to go to your GP." And then she went to her GP, who said, "Oh no, it's nothing to do with me. You have to go back to Mary Stopes." So eventually, in desperation, she contacted me again because she had been in contact with me earlier when we had discussed the progesterone situation. And I tried. It sounded from the phone from our conversation over the phone, that she was developing serious complications with probable retained products of conception, an incomplete abortion, and probable infection, because she told me that she was having sweats and fevers. So I told her she had to go and be seen in a proper medical facility. So she went to Casualty. They actually turned her away initially. They gave her pain relief and said to come back if problems persisted. But then when she told me, I told her, no, you must go back. You need antibiotics. I even told her what antibiotics that she would have to get because she was allergic to penicillin. And then eventually she got properly treated, and eventually she ended up having a surgical procedure. So this all came back to the...
Sort of stop you there a minute, Dermot. You mentioned 7%. So, we're posting out these pills to women, and about 7% of them have quite serious complications that may require...
Yeah, well, we know from the Freedom of Information studies, and again, these are the ones that we know about. There may be lots of others that we don't get to know about.
Yeah.
Because women don't always, and understandably, don't always want it on their medical record that they've taken abortion pills. And many of the women that I've been involved with have, because I asked them all, do you want me to inform your GP about this? And most of them say, no, please don't. I don't want this on my medical record. So I have to respect that. So of those where the information is known, we know that they're from the freedom of information that has been obtained through ambulance trusts and NHS trusts, that about 1 in 17 women who've taken the abortion pills end up attending emergency services with complications. Most of them are due to incomplete abortions. including some having serious infections. A lot of them are due to excessive bleeding and heavy bleeding that might require blood transfusions. So some of them need to be hospitalized for these complications. Some of them turn out to be not quite so serious, but we know that at least 1 in 17 of women who obtain the abortion pills and go ahead with the abortion will end up attending emergency services shortly after they've taken the abortion tablets. So that's where that figure comes from. Of the risks.
So and the letter, I understand, has been signed by one of these patients who's willing to testify and has testified before about.
Yeah, so back on her story, she so word got through to Mary Stopes about the complication that she had, and then when the complaints were being made to the GMC about myself and Dr. Riley, he contacted her on the very day actually that we were informed. He first of all he phoned her. He phoned her and he tried to tell her that this was these doctors who were providing this progesterone were under investigation and this was very serious and that he needed to get some information from her about me. And she, by this stage, she knew that I had been very kind to her. I had helped her. I'd helped to sort out her problem. And she didn't know who this guy was, and she phoned me the same day. It says, I've been approached by this doctor. He says he's high up in Mary Stopes and he wants to know information about you. She said, but I didn't tell him anything. And then shortly after that, when she put the phone down, he sent her an email because they had her email or contact details. And in it, he said, and we have it in writing, that a number of other patients had complained about these doctors. And we know that that's not true because they weren't able to provide any evidence to the GMC of these other patients who had complained about this poor experience that they had suffered. So that was deliberately trying to presumably deliberately trying to give false information to a patient in the hope that she would be swayed to provide a false witness against myself, which I think that's pretty serious, and it should be taken. And when it turned out to be untrue, because she was, as I said, she was one of the strongest supporters on our side, on my side, and wrote very nice reports wrote a very nice report about myself and how I had treated her and supported her.
Even though she went through the abortion.
She did, yeah, but she regretted that, and she told. But that's, and she's forgiven because something that she has great remorse over, and she's a lovely lady.
Fantastic. So this complaint has been submitted to the GMC, and have you heard anything back from the GMC yet?
Yeah, well, we got an acknowledgement to say yes. They have thank you for sending the complaint. They had a few other issues a few other questions that they want that weren't clear from the initial submission. So they sent that, and having gone over that with some other people, I've sent that back. Just last night and this morning, I got another acknowledgement from them to say that they had received all of the information and they're going to pass it on to the appropriate persons who look into these matters, and they'll be in touch with us as soon as possible.
Any idea how long it will take, the investigation? How long will it take with you?
I'd expect to hear something back within 2 weeks. That's their usual working time when they receive an allegation or a complaint. They look at it and you'll receive some sort of, it may not be a definitive decision or anything, but you'll receive some sort of information, usually within 2 weeks.
Wow. And what do you hope will happen?
Well, I hope they'll take the issue seriously. I hope that they won't just dismiss it and push it under the carpet, which could happen. I hope that they will see that these are serious allegations and that they need to investigate it. And I hope ultimately, of course, that it'll lead to more the abortion pill reversal service that we're trying to offer, and we're trying to encourage other doctors to offer, that it'll boost its credibility. Because at the moment there's still a campaign to discredit it, and I would hope that whatever action the GMC think is fit or necessary, that whatever happens, that it will lead to a better service for women, a better service for mothers who requested the service. Obviously, ultimately, I'd like to see abortion being banned, but that's not going to happen on the basis of this complaint. But even if they allowed us to provide this service to women and accept that it has that it is a credible service, that is safe, often effective, not always effective, and we're totally honest about that. We want to provide any information. We give our figures of anyone from the the CQC or GMC or anyone asks to see anything that we've done, I'm very happy to share any of the information, as long as it doesn't break the patient confidentiality.
Sure. Well, well done for all that you're doing there, Dermot, and especially congratulations on saving multiple lives through this process. And we really hope that this treatment becomes, like you said, gains much better credibility through this whole process, and that Jonathan Lord gets disciplined, I think, for misleading people and providing false information. That's a very, very serious thing that he's done there. So we really appreciate that. We've written an article on our website about it. If you want to read more detail, I'm sure my friends will post it in the comments there. But moving on to a slightly different topic, Tim. The House of Lords this week debated abortion buffer zones. Tell us about that and what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose one of the common threads, Tim and Dermot, is the issue of choice. Because the pro-abortion movement styles itself as people that are pro-choice, but it seems to me from the case that you've been discussing, Dermot, where a woman actually changes her mind and makes the choice, a decision to reverse that, it's as if Mary Stopes, BPAS, don't want that to happen. They don't want that choice to be allowed. And I think there's a significance to that in terms of what's been happening. So, I think we'll maybe come to signs of hope at the end, but I think we have to stress this is a dark day, really, for freedom of speech, freedom of religion in this country, and for democracy. And actually, wherever one stands on the legality of abortion or not, I think, and there have been lords who contributed to the debate who were pro-abortion but could recognise the serious and sort of deleterious effects of this legislation. So this was originally a clause that was added to a government bill by Rupert Hook to bring in these buffer zones. So we're talking about 150-metre sort of area radius around individual clinics, 370 or so in the country. In fact, my colleague worked out that we're talking about in total an area of 26 square kilometres. So this is a serious amount of space that pro-life people are no longer sort of allowed to enter and offer help, offer advice, information to women and girls who are having abortions. So it's been ever so slightly modified, and this amendment was voted on this week and has sort of been passed by the Lords too. The 2-year prison sentence for doing that has been replaced by a level 5 fine, which, as I understand it, is technically unlimited. So it's still a serious consequence if the police decide to charge you. The thing that has also come out is, as I understand it, prayer. So some of the viewers may know about the PSPOs, the Public Spaces Protection Orders, which already 2 people have obviously fallen foul of that. And I think, Elizabeth Vaughan-Spruce, I think she may have been on in the past, and Adam Smith-Connor. So they were praying silently in their heads, just take that in for a moment, praying silently in their heads, and were arrested and charged by the police. So you do wonder what kind of society we are heading towards here. Now, so prayer has been not included, and the language that's used is influencing any person's decision. So either they don't think prayer has any power to influence, or I don't know, but 1 or 2 people, it seems to be, would not be deemed as influencing or interfering. But if people came in any numbers to pray, that would be seen as more serious. And of course, I guess if you had any kind of placard, any kind of banner, or even, I guess, a T-shirt with a pro-life symbol on, that would be deemed as interference too. So, as I say, it's not a good moment for our country. It's a dark day. And having worked through the transcript, the Hansard transcript, although there were 1 or 2 people who spoke against it, on the whole, it was more positive for this amendment, and there was almost even a kind of self-congratulatory air at times. There's one comment that this is the House of Lords at its best. So this is what we want our nation to be known for, celebrated for, banning or criminalising indeed offers of help to desperate women and girls, some of whom, as Dr. Kearney said, will have been coerced at this point to have an abortion. And what we've done is we've removed the last vestiges of peaceful dissent from the killing of children, and this is somehow seen as our finest hour.
Crazy.
It is, and another pro-life organisation put it as we've criminalised compassion, and I think that's a really nice catchphrase. We have criminalised compassion, and 2 things to kind of point out from the House of Lords, the rest of the general sort of representations. One of which, and this won't come as any surprise, having heard from Dermot, but the level of misrepresentation for pro-life people, the words that are constantly bandied around are threatening behavior, harassment, intimidation, shouting. Now, no one has ever been convicted of that sort of threatening, abusive behavior in a pro-life sense outside an abortion facility. If anything, that kind of behavior is often seen from the pro-choice side, in fact. So
it's already a criminal offence of harassment anyway.
Exactly.
So why do we
exactly.
need a new law here anyway? Because if harassment is an issue, well, fine, arrest them for harassment. But
absolutely,
there's no need for a new law on that basis.
Absolutely, and that was the gist of kind of Lord Farmer's concerns of this, I think, which were ultimately thrown out. So there's pure propaganda going on. There's often the mention of these shadowy, sinister American groups that are somehow bankrolling this whole effort. We're never told who they are really in great detail, but somehow bankrolling people to stand out in the wind and the rain with offering help and advice. And the other ominous factor is the level of the number of lords who kind of mention Mary Stopes, who mention BPAS very sort of warmly, as if these organizations are somehow neutral, disinterested, unbiased parties, generously offering their advice, as if they don't have a massive stake in this, really, and as we've seen. So that in a kind of nutshell, Tim, is what's been going on.
There were some bishops, were there not, in the House of Lords? How did they get on in terms of speaking out for free speech and pro-life?
Yeah, so obviously there's 26 Lords Spiritual, 26 Church of England bishops in the House of Lords. And in fact, in the first time the original Clause 9 was debated, I believe the Bishop of St. Albans expressed some concerns. So there was a bishop who expressed concerns about the implications of this for freedom of religion, freedom of speech. But unfortunately, certainly from my point of view, in this last round of debates where the legislation was passed, the Bishop of Manchester, David Walker, did speak essentially in favour of the amendment. And I'll just pick out a few things of what he said, because it's quite illuminating, really. So he begins by saying this clause has nothing to do with the moral merits, or his concerns have nothing to do with the moral merits or otherwise of abortion. But he then, in the sort of same breath, goes on to call abortion healthcare, which seems something to me of a fairly comprehensive moral judgment. So the bishop. So
this bishop referred to abortion as healthcare that we should be entitled to.
Absolutely, and this is, again, this is one of the many euphemisms that are used, whether it's women's rights, reproductive justice. It's a complete. We're talking about the killing of children. So for a bishop to use those terms is quite extraordinary. He then goes on that women must be able to access lawful medical interventions. Again, another euphemism. What does it describe? It's describing ending a child's life without facing distressing confrontations. And again, if any of your viewers want to, again, really see the reality of abortion, I direct you to the website abortionreality.com just to see what abortion really involves. But medical intervention, what kind of medicine is this that we're talking about? And then the distressing confrontations. I mean, we've talked about the language of confrontation is not helpful. It almost conjures up images of the police facing off with rioters. This is not the sort of thing that's going on at all. So I kind of reject that language of confrontation. But people are being offered an alternative, as Dermot is offering, to killing their own child, and perhaps being reminded at the very last moment what abortion is, what this involves. So again, women are being offered a genuine choice at this point, which presumably the pro-abortion lobby, pro-choice people would welcome. They would celebrate that. But no, they don't want any shred of doubt to impinge at this point. They want women's choices, I would suggest, to be as uninformed actually as possible. And if there is distress caused, I would say that's a proper moral response. That is someone's conscience kicking in. There's a recognition there of what abortion involves. Of course, it's a moral question, whether or not the bishop recognises that. And I just think this narrative of healthcare is, I think, one of the most perverse. It's a lie. It's a pernicious lie, which, as a Christian, I would say, as all untruths, originates with the father of lies, who Jesus, interestingly said, has been murdering people from the beginning, John 8:44. So it's disappointing, to say the least, that a Church of England bishop is choosing to propagate that lie rather than refute it.
So I think, Tim, I found it shocking as well that he said he couldn't support an alternative medicine that would actually, not stop, not not have these buffer zones, Lord Farmer's amendment, because it removes safe zones without a process to re-engage. So he basically said he wants what they're calling safe zones, these buffer zones. He wants to have zones where you can't talk about abortion. That's what he wants, and I was like, well, what is the bishop doing, saying they want to have zones where you can't present a case, or talk or discuss or share a Christian opinion on something? I mean, that's extraordinary for a bishop to say, no, Christians shouldn't be allowed to share a Christian opinion on something in these places. I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it?
It is, and the amendment was slightly tweaked to presumably satisfy human rights requirements and contain sensible limits. But again, one has to ask, well, where are the human rights of the child in all of this? You're completely overlooked. When is it ever okay, reasonable, sensible to take a child's life because he or she is deemed inconvenient? He does talk a little bit about influence. So influence can not only come from a pro-life person, but also influence can come in the form of coercion through a partner. So the bishop acknowledges that, which is good. But then, as I say, that final bit of courage or impetus a woman or girl might have needed to stand up to her abuser, potentially, and reject abortion through the offer of information or help has been criminalized. And yes, I mean, I think the most damning statement on the Bishop of Manchester's contributions here was that Rachel Clark, who works for BPAS, very deliberately tweeted afterwards her appreciation and support of several of the lords, and singled out the Bishop of Manchester for his clarity and his support. So there are, whatever the bishop thinks he's up to, there's absolutely no doubt how the abortion industry, how the abortion lobby interpreted his words, his actions, which is one of support for the killing of children. So as you say, Tim, what is the Church of England up to? And in fact, I would suggest that the Bishop of Manchester here is actually he's out of step with the Church of England, which in theory, at least in its wording, opposes abortion in principle. So the Church of England combines principled opposition with a recognition that there can be strictly limited conditions under which abortion may be morally preferable to any available alternative. Now, that's the Church of England. It's not obviously the Catholic position, and I would want that position reformed further in the light of God's word. But even as it is, the Church of England is opposed in principled opposition, and it goes on to say that all abortions are tragedies. All abortions are tragedies, and then every possible support, especially by church members, needs to be given to those who are pregnant in difficult circumstances and care. So whether or not the Church of England is practicing what it preaches, that's the sort of party line. So unfortunately, the Bishop of Manchester is completely out of step with his own church on this. And
their own teaching.
I think, yeah, absolutely. So he's not really doing what a bishop should be doing, which is upholding the faith once delivered to the saints, teaching the Bible, safeguarding Christian truth. I mean, my colleague who came up with worked out the 26 kilometre squared buffer zone areas, also worked out on an average there'll be 7 of these per Church of England diocese in the UK. So I suppose it's an interesting test case. Again, where is the Church of England gonna find itself? Is it going to support church members actually who, in entering these zones, in the words of Proverbs 24:11, are seeking to rescue those who are being taken away to death, hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter, or Ephesians 5:11, seeking to expose the unfruitful works of darkness rather than having anything to do with them, and in doing these things find themselves criminalized, arrested, fined? Is the church going to speak out in support of these, some of whom may be members of their own congregations, or are they going to throw them under the bus and ignore them? What side of history does the church want to be on? And for me, anyway, the Bishop of Manchester doesn't understand the spiritual stakes involved here. The Bible is very clear that those involved in killing children rupture their relationship with God. They pollute the land with innocent blood. This is the language of his prophet Ezekiel, of Psalm 106, for example. So yeah, I think he's gone way beyond what the Church of England teaches. He's speaking on his own authority, I would suggest.
So Tim, I'm conscious of time as well, but it's that was the second reading in the House of Lords, and I understand there's a third reading, which is almost more of a formality, I think, on Monday coming, the 6th of February, and then it will go back to the Commons, and sadly the likelihood is that this amendment comes into law. Subsequent to that, we will see. I think there may be chance for alternative amendments still, and then of course if it does come into law, I know they think they might have made it compatible with human rights, but I don't think that it can be compatible with human rights in terms of banning people from saying things in certain places. So I think there's very likely to be a legal challenge on the basis that this is a breach of human rights onto this law as well, which I would hope will succeed. So we shall see on that. But like you say, a very sad day when the House of Lords congratulates itself on approving this, and when a bishop of the Church of England actually supports these new zones around there. Listen, thank you very much for joining us, both of you, Dermot and Tim. We will be praying for that GMC investigation, Dermot, and hope that it finds truthfully and establishes what's right and lends further credibility to this post first abortion reversal treatment, first abortion pill reversal treatment that you are offering that has saved multiple lives, 44 lives, I think you said. And for Tim in your new role and all that you're doing there to counter the forces around abortion and things. And so thank you for watching. Thank you for engaging. Do share and like and follow us on social media and connect with us on our website. And I look forward to speaking with you again next week when we have General Synod, which will be very interesting to observe and watch. And I'm sure we'll be reporting on that next week. Thank you very much.